Now it's time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Ken.
Hi, I am Ken Cross and I am an alcoholic. And thank Izzy for giving a great talk. It was fantastic. Happy birthday to the birthday people, to Rick for 25. That's amazing, you know, and welcome to the newcomers and especially to the people that took a one-year cake. You know, that's a huge accomplishment. John and I were sitting here remembering I took my first year cake on February 3rd, Friday night, 1984. I was secretary of a meeting upstairs at Beverly Glen Hospital, and I had a very famous person speak, and then we all went to dinner and partied like we thought we were crazy rock stars or something, you know. I think I took 21 cakes that year or something, maybe more. The cake whore syndrome. Well, I want to thank Alan for asking me to come share. Alan's a steadfast member of one of my many home groups, and I always love it when he's there and when he participates, as well as some of the other guys that are here from my men's group. I go to about 5 men's stags a week, and so I always enjoy when I see the men in the meetings. Actually, one of our men's stags is actually a co-ed men's stag. We changed it. A woman came in who needed a meeting, and we took a group conscience and decided she should stay, and now about 1/3 of the group is women. And I was telling John earlier, somebody said to me the other day, they said, "Are most men's stags like this?" You know, I've never seen a men's stag, I've never seen a meeting where so many people reach out to the newcomer and make sure the newcomer feels welcomed. And see, you guys in the back have dirty minds. But, and I'll tell you why, because I told John a story a minute ago and it gave me goosebumps. You know, we got to the meeting early yesterday and it's in a bar, because that's the best place to find alcoholics if you want to have an AA meeting. And this guy came walking in, about 65 years old, and he had a duffel bag and he had a blue suit on a hanger. And he said, "Is this AA?" And I said, "Yeah, come on in, sit down, grab a seat." And a couple of guys went over and welcomed him and sat down and talked to him. And they came over to me and said, started to tell me his story, and he had just gotten out of a rehab in Phoenix. He had 90 days, and his daughter had just committed suicide. He was hitchhiking to Oregon to go to the service. His ex-wife told him he couldn't come. He came in the meeting. The men picked him up, put him in a booth, bought him lunch. He hadn't eaten in a day. He'd been on the road. By the end of the meeting, the guy had over $300. They were taking him to the Greyhound station. He had a ticket up to Oregon and enough money for a ticket home and enough money for the food for the entire trip. Because that's what the guys in my AA group do for newcomers. You know, we reach out and try to take care of the guy that's hurting and who's in pain and who's having that experience. The same way people did for me 23.5 years ago, you know. John always likes to tell people he saved my life. In a way, he kind of did, but if it helps his ego, God bless him, you know. But when I got here, I was living in a stolen Volkswagen Rabbit. I'd done a coke deal from the concierge of the Bonanno family in Tucson, and I ripped him off. I had a little bit of money left in my pocket. I was sleeping up in this car on Mulholland off of Outpost on some turnouts. I would put towels up in the window so that if the cops came by and knocked on the window, I'd like have a second to get my act together, because looking good at all cost was all that really mattered, you know. I would wake up in the morning, I'd go down to the 7-Eleven, I'd buy a newspaper, a muffin, and a cup of coffee, and I'd go to Plummer Park and I'd sit there and I would read every word in the LA Times because I had nowhere else to go, you know. I was trying to call people and crash on couches. One guy said, "Sure, come on over." I walked in his house. He was sitting on his bed with his toe in the ring of a shotgun about to blow his head off. You know, this was a guy I'd been on the road with for a long time, you know, who had finally flipped out due to drugs and alcohol. And I actually, you know, I called John, and John said I had known John. John and I have been friends since about 70 or 71. There's a lot of people in this room I know for a long, long time, you know, in sobriety and before sobriety, and many, many different hairstyles, right, guys? Boy, the 80s were hard on all of us, I think, huh? But I did not have any jackets that had too many zippers. That I gotta say, right? And I don't think I had anything with pads in the shoulders. Like, did you, Neil? Members only. And John was so afraid of me at the time because he knew how crazy I was. Because hell, when John and I used to hang out, we used to put cocaine in our eyeballs just for effect. And seriously, it was really a trip. We would go into the dark room with the red lights and put cocaine in our eyeballs and see what would happen, you know? And any other orifice that it would fit, which was also another interesting Rush concept for those of you who think smoking is the only way to get high. And, you know, and John said, I'll meet you at Barney's Beanery. That's about as close as he was willing to go, is I'll meet you at Barney's Beanery. And I went there and we sat down in a booth and he said, you know what, there's another friend of mine coming, Charlie. And I said, well, who's this Charlie guy? And he goes, well, he's my sponsor. And he said, well, I've got 90 days. I've been in AA for a year and a half, and I haven't had a drink or done any drugs in 90 days. And I thought, nah, he's lying. I mean, you know, we spent way too many times with our nose sniffing out the corners of little brown bottles, you know. And Charlie showed up, you know, and they sat there and talked a bunch of stuff to me, and I probably nodded my head a lot, and I don't know what was said. Probably the basic concept of the conversation was if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, maybe you might want to try something different. Now, when you're 31 years old, living in a stolen Volkswagen, and you've destroyed every single opportunity in every relationship in your life, you kind of start to believe that you've grown up to be the piece of shit that your stepfather always told you were going to be, you know? So I thought, well, shit, maybe I'll go with these guys to this meeting, you know? And one of the great gifts of staying sober was last year at this very meeting, it fell on the night of my first AA meeting, which was Rodeo, and John and Charlie gave me a 22-year cake that year. You know, I mean, that's the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember when I first got here, I thought, you know, being at Rodeo and being at all these other meetings and Sundowners and all this finger-snapping, hip-hopping, groovy stuff, you know, thinking, man, I'm going to be back in Laurel Canyon. I'll have another Harley. I'll be up in the hills. I'll have another gig back in the music business. Boy, in a year, they'll ask me to speak at Rodeo, and I'll just be, you know, I'll be on Mr. Sobriety, Pink Cloud Row. You know, in day 366, it was like, where the hell is mine? At least I wasn't sleeping on his couch anymore, but I think I'd moved to her couch instead, actually to her bed. But I still hadn't had a job in a year. I think I was doing freelance AD work or stuff like that and hustling. Basically, I was hustling in sobriety the way I hustled when I was drinking and using, you know? Because I left home at 16 years old. I did my first stint in jail at 17 years old. I stuck a needle in my arm for the first time at 18 years old, and I didn't look back. You know, I needed to learn how to survive. You know, I come from a family of alcoholics. You know, I thought, I come out of Greenwich Village in the 60s where it was all flashing peace signs and driving our 59 Chevy to the Fillmore and taking acid and thinking we're going to change the world and how groovy we are and all this crap. And there went my train of thought. So, end of that story. It's LSD. It'll do it to you every time. She was talking about acid. I used to shoot window pane. And then after you peak, do a little heroin to cut the edge off. The problem was when you're like just peaking and the hallucinations are still happening, it's a tough hit. But, you know, I remember what I was saying, is that I grew up in a family of alcoholics. You know, I grew up in a family of alcoholics. I was a cool little hippie with long hair. There was no way I was going to be a drunk. I'm an ex-jock. I played basketball from the time I was probably 5 years old, 12 months out of the year, every single week. Police league, school league, church league, you name it. First time I hit a joint, basketball was out the window. First time the coach told me to do some insane drill, I was like, dude, what are you thinking about? I'm out of here. And literally, so there was no way I was going to be a drunk. You know, there were the juicers and the heads when I went to high school, and there was no way I was going to be a juicer. So, you know, my mother, 47 years old, I went to see her in the hospital. She was in a halo bed with screws in her head and blood running down because she'd flipped her car 6 times and broken her back. Died 3 weeks later. Alcoholism, you know, complete alcoholism. By the time she was 47, she'd had a kidney taken out, a lung taken out, had liver disease, had jaundice, and finally ended up dead and looked like she was 65 years old. My stepfather, full-blown alcoholic, ex-con, ex-Marine drill sergeant, ex-weightlifter, you know, complete insane hypertension, beat the crap, abusive guy. You know, no way I'm going to grow up to be an alcoholic. You want to know a scary thing is when the first time you get in a fight with your girlfriend and you hear your stepfather's words coming out of your mouth, you think, holy shit, I've grown up to become this idiot, you know? I mean, and this is a guy I've had showdowns with pistols with, so. My plan was not to be an alcoholic. I was way too cool, you know? And, you know, I ended up with great opportunities. Through a strange series of events, I ended up, you know, getting jobs in some really weird places, doing some really weird things, snorting cocaine and heroin off of gold records with $100 bills, thinking everything my parents told me was a lie and that this is the way you're supposed to live life. You know, and John and I ran around Atlanta and around Macon, Georgia like we were just complete crazy boys, hanging out at the Playboy Club and all these other places, just like absolute insanity. And, you know, so by the time I got here, there's just no way I'm an alcoholic. There's absolutely no way I'm an alcoholic. And John takes me to my meeting, takes me to this meeting, and they sit me down next to Zachary H. and next to this guy Doug from Dallas, and they put me in the middle, and these guys are on me. Then the speaker gets up, and he's talking about making millions of dollars and losing millions of dollars, and I'm feeling about as less than as an ant looking for a rock to hide under. I'm sitting there counting Rolexes thinking, what am I doing in this room, you know? I mean, my life had been over for a good 6 months. I mean, I'd been like just barely crawling through any self-esteem issues at all. And, you know, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And then what happened is this crazy lunatic of a guy stood up and started to share that he was back in a meeting and that he had relapsed. And he talked about his relapse, and he talked about picking up stucco out of the carpet. He talked about standing in the bathtub and peeking out of the holes in the tinfoil till 5 in the morning, you know. He talked about all that stuff that I understood oh too well. And then he said the one thing that changed my life was he said the reason he was back in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was because he knew that this is where the hope was. This is where the hope was. I went to that meeting with John for basically 2, maybe 3 reasons. I knew he would feed me. I knew he would let me sleep on his couch. And I knew if I was okay, he might give me some work at his studio. I did not wake up and think, this seems like a good day to check into rehab and never take drugs or drink alcohol again. That was not my mindset. Now, I'm living in a stolen car, not where my next meal is coming from, but I do not have a clue that my life is unmanageable. Not even a little one. You know, I'm thinking I'm just a victim of bad breaks and misunderstandings. You know, if only they'd have done it differently, if only they'd paid more attention to me, it would have worked out differently. It never mattered that every single time I got myself involved in a situation, I destroyed that situation with the exact same behavior that I had destroyed the situation with the time before. There was no insanity in any of that behavior, at least none that I could see. Now, I had my father's second wife in 1970. This is back when I was like really regaled with waist-length hair and deerskin shirts with fringe and beads and very Woodstocky Hendrix, telling me that I had a drug problem. And I thought, and literally what I said to her was, so, you know, because let me tell you, I was having a really good time back then. And it took about 7 more years of complete insanity till I kind of crossed that invisible line that we talk about, you know, where it just didn't seem like it worked anymore. It just didn't seem like it worked. It didn't matter how much blow I did. It didn't matter how many Quaaludes I took. It didn't matter how many chicks I picked up in a week. None of it fixed me. All I did was get crazier and crazier and more desperate and more destitute. And the destitution wasn't the kind of a material kind. It was the kind of a soul sickness, you know. I had no idea who I was anymore. I had no idea where I was going. You know, I thought I was going to be this little hippie kid. I was going to be a writer. I was going to do all this stuff. We were going to change the world. And then somehow somebody introduced me to Class A narcotics and everything changed course, you know. And, you know, and when I came to this meeting, the guy gave me, and I was telling John earlier, a gentleman gave me a big book that had more time and who was older than me. I like to, and was it Brad who took the 15-year cake and said that he feels like an old-timer? Pretty soon you're going to realize you don't want to feel like an old-timer. You know, I don't like using the word old anymore. Because when I got here, I was this 31-year-old little hip slick West Hollywood rock and roller, and now I'm like a 55-year-old guy with way too many surgeries and too many gray hairs and, you know, all the stuff that wasn't going to happen to me. You know what I mean? I was way too cool for this getting old stuff, right, Neil? But, you know, this gentleman gave me a big book, and it's the same big book I have today, even though I have 3, because I've had to go to the big print version, you know. But, and he said to me, he goes, you know what, have you got a place to go read this? And I said, yeah, because John was giving me his couch, which I slept on for 5.5 months. And he said, I want you to take this back, and I want you to read chapter 3, more about alcoholism. You know, he wasn't one of these guys who said, go to the first page where it's blank and start there. And Kenny knows, it was Tom Kenny, you know, our dear, dear, dear friend, Tom Kenny, who to me is one of the angriest, gruffest, mean, nasty old-timers I've ever met, but he has more love and has saved a lot of lives in this world. And he said, I want you to read more about alcoholism. And he said, if you have any problems with the word alcohol, I want you to substitute it for cocaine, cocainism, heroin, heroinism. You know, today it'd be like Vicodin, Vicodinism, maybe crack or crackism. But he said, I want you to identify with the feelings in this book about what it talks about, you know, and I went back and I started reading this thing. And I started to read that first page, and then I got onto the second page. And by the time I was done with the second page, it was like a wall of bricks had fallen on me, you know, because I had convinced myself that I'd grown up to become this crazy piece of shit that was worthless, that I had no value to myself or to anybody else. You know, I was in LA a few years before I had bottomed out, and I went to a show that some friends of mine put on from Atlanta, and I'd known these guys for years. And I'm walking around the hotel suite, and I got a bottle of Dom under one arm, and I got a brown bottle in each pocket. The one is for hers because it's been cut more, and the other is for me because it's pure. And I'm thinking I'm just the dude at this party after a show. And I look over, and there's a keyboard player, and I've known the guy for probably 8 or 9 years, and he's looking at me with this look of complete deceit, and he's shaking his head at me. And then I see him mouth the words to me from across the room. He goes, still the same. You know, because he saw the game. He saw the game that I played, which was just hustling, trying to get by, trying to look good no matter what. Didn't care about anybody else or anything else. It was just about how was I going to survive? How was I going to get more drugs? How was I going to get laid? How was I going to get through tomorrow, you know? And when I read chapter 3 more about alcoholism, I actually became convinced that night that I suffered from a disease called alcoholism, no matter how many 27-gauge needles I stuck in my arm. No matter how many freebase pipes I held to my mouth, I was convinced that I was an alcoholic, that I suffered from the disease of alcoholism. Being an alcoholic doesn't mean that I drank too much. Being an alcoholic means that I have the disease of alcoholism, you know? I always think it's so redundant when I hear people go, I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. You know, I don't understand that because, I don't know, that's an opinion. Excuse me for my opinions. But, oh, who knows? Who knows? You know, I have a great life today. I got 23 and a half years of just absolute amazing experiences in recovery. I've been in jail 3 times. I've had 7 or 8 jobs. I've gone through at least 7 or 8 girlfriends. I've been engaged 3 times. I've had 7 tumors taken out of my body in the last 4 years. I haven't worked in 4 years. And I have a great fucking life. Pardon my French, but it's a rodeo, you know? And my life is wonderful because I still go to 7 to 9 to 10 meetings every single week. I was told that there's no problem that 1,000 meetings won't fix. And I believe that, you know, and you know why I believe it? Because I've experienced every problem in sobriety that I can imagine. You know, I never thought I'd be diagnosed with a brain tumor. I never thought I'd owe the IRS $84,000. I never thought I'd have some of the situations that I had happen to me in my life. I showed up, Alcoholics Anonymous surrounded me in every situation. The people reminded me what I'd been taught and then carried me through the situation as I walked forward. You know, we were talking about it the other day in a meeting. You know, God might steer the boat, but we still have to row the boat. you know, and I was sharing with Alan afterwards. When I was a kid, I sat in the back seat of my dad's car, my mom's car, and I had a little fake steering wheel. You know, and every now and then somebody would make a right turn right as I was making a right turn, and I thought, man, I'm driving the car, aren't I cool? I got that 57 Fairlane whipping around the corner, you know? And it's a lot like sobriety. You know, you get sober, you start to get a little life going, you make a little money, you get a little love, a little romance, a little finance, things are getting good, I don't need to go to as many meetings, you know, I'm just out there driving that car. Next thing you know, there's 2 garbage trucks meeting head on, bam, you know, and here come the sponsors trying to clean up the mess, you know. Well, how many meetings have you been going to? How many panels are you going on? How many people are you sponsoring these days? How many of the simple things are you doing? I was talking to a friend of mine today with 25 years from another, no, he's from this fellowship, but from the other group. And he was talking about how his group is so, well, and not just his group, a lot of AA is just so full of people who stay sober on fellowship, you know? And it's great for certain times, but you know what? I've seen a lot of people eat pistols in 23 years. I've seen a lot of people take 50, 60 Vicodins and wash it down with a bottle of vodka, you know? Untreated alcoholism will kill you as fast as anything else. Funny thing is nowadays, it's rare that I hear about some guy who decides to go to the bar and drink a glass of Jack Daniels. You know, it's usually Vicodin or Percocet. You know, seems to be the miracle drug that kills the alcoholic today. And, you know, we never know when one thing we say or one thing we hear is going to change our life forever. My sponsor early on told me that if you say one thing in an AA meeting that one person hears that he can affect his life, you've done your job in an AA meeting. Doesn't matter if it happens out there, it doesn't matter if it happens out there, it doesn't matter if it happens up here. You know, I spoke at a roundup in Tehachapi last week, and after I got done talking, this guy comes up to me, and he's a burly dude, shaved head, tats all the way up, 2 arms sleeved out completely, and he goes, "You're not going to remember me." He goes, "But you spoke at Weingart Center when I was in Weingart in 1991. He goes, "I've been sober ever since." He goes, "I want to introduce you to my wife and my 2 kids." You know, and he took me over to his little campsite and introduced me to his wife and his 2 kids. And he has a job up in Palmdale, and his wife has a job up in Palmdale. You know what? And he doesn't drive a Mercedes, but he has a pickup truck. And you know what? He's surrounded by love in his life. Because when I got here, I thought, you know what? It's going to be all the things. I'm going to get the things. You know, I'm going to struggle to get the things. I'm going to like do what I have to do to survive in LA. You know, and John knows I had been in the music business, I'd been in the film business, I'd worked a lot and done a lot of different things. And I went from living in a stolen car to working as a gopher to moving furniture to, God, what else did I do? I sold labels that they sew in women's clothing for different companies that are made in China. I mean, I did some kooky stuff. But when you're in a high school dropout, that's kind of like the best you can hope for sometimes, you know? But what AA taught me was you show up every day, you be of maximum service, and you go the extra mile, you know? And that's what I was taught to do. That's what Kenny was taught to do. And I see Kenny now, and Kenny's like, you know, has a great life, and John has a great life, and Alan has a, you know, these guys. We did the simple things that we were taught to do, you know, and through this process of events, you know, I was led back into the career I wanted. I was led back into a position that was you know, a fantastic thing for me. I had this great job, this great life. I thought, man, I'm fixed, I'm cured. I'm still going to a lot of meetings, I'm doing all this stuff. And in one day, it was all taken away from me when I got sick. You know, I lost the parking spot with my name on it. I lost my table at the commissary that was reserved for me every day at lunch. I lost all my privilege to get on this studio and do whatever it was I needed to do. You know, it was like in a day. In a day, I went from this thing to like living on disability checks and having Medicare for an insurance provider in a day, you know? And what I learned from that experience and what my sponsor taught me is that if you're not happy being sober and if you can't walk away from everything that's in your life, you're never gonna be happy. You're just not gonna be happy. Because no matter how much you think the big stuff is gonna fix it, the big stuff ain't gonna fix it. You know, that until you find that soul sickness in your heart and you try to figure out a way to fill up that hole, you're never going to be comfortable. You're never going to be comfortable. My friend John said, oh, tell him the one thing. You know, one of my blessings, one of my absolute blessings in AA is that I've gotten to travel a lot. I've been to meetings in Moscow. I've been to meetings in Helsinki, Costa Rica, you name it. I've been to the northernmost city in North America where the sun hardly goes down. My favorite meeting was one night I was over in Phoenix visiting Howard P., and they said, come on, we're taking an outreach thing to a meeting, and we load into 2 minivans, and we drive outside of Phoenix, and it starts getting really dark. And then we hit a road that has no street lights, and we keep driving down this road, really dark. And then off in the distance, I see a little glow, and we pull into this spot, and we're out on an Indian reservation about 75, 85 miles outside of Phoenix. And we sit down in this circle outside, we're eating tamales, we're surrounded by saguaro cactus with a full moon, and the man next to me is taking his 40-year birthday cake. He was an Indian that smelled like dust. His Levi's had been on him since he got sober, I think, you know? And they found this Indian man in a ditch drunk, passed out, and they had no idea how many days he was in this ditch. He was taking a 40-year cake. The man across the circle from me celebrated his 53rd year that night, you know? And I listened to the sharing of these people that live on a reservation and have hardly any life, and every one of them was filled with gratitude. Every one of them was filled with gratitude, you know? And the point of that story is that in my travels, I've met many, many great old-timers, you know, with a lot of time. And one time, one of these guys gave me the Sonny talk, you know? He goes, you know, Sonny, he said, he goes, it ain't the bear that ruins the picnics, it's the ants. You know, and that's exactly it. It's not the big stuff that's going to screw you up in life. It's that little stuff that you obsess on. It's that little stuff that makes you crazy. It's that little stuff day to day that you think's such a big deal. It's a guy that cut you off on the 405. It's not being able to get to the bank before it closes. You know, having a hangnail on your ring finger or something, you know, or screwing up my golf game, something like that. And you know, what I've learned in the last, you know, umpteen years is that, you know, if I'm not right with myself and I'm not right with the fact that I'm breathing and that each day I breathe is a gigantic gift. I mean, my last 6 months were hanging out with guys that were called the Dirty Dozen and the Mongols, riding a Harley with a loaded .44 and a shoulder holster, open on the outside of my clothes with bullets in it because it's against the law to carry it without bullets. And those are the people I hung out with. Now, if I kept shooting cocaine and drinking Jack Daniels and hanging out with those people, I don't know how many more months or years I would have had to live. You know, I've watched human beings' heads get shot off with a .45. You know, I've watched people take gut shots from .44 Magnums. You know, I've seen stuff that most human beings shouldn't see, you know, all in the name of partying, you know. We were talking about it at dinner. I still have friends that are Hell's Angels. I still have friends that are Vagos, you know, and no matter what, you hang out with Vagos or Hell's Angels, I don't care if you're best friends. You say the wrong thing and you're taking a beating because that's the way those people live, you know. And if I'd have kept living that lifestyle, I'd have been dead. So every day I draw a breath, I'm grateful. Every day I get to meet a new guy in sobriety that's trying to find this path for himself and try to find a way that he can make his life better a little bit at a time. I'm grateful. You know, any opportunity I get to be of service, I'm grateful. You know, we never, ever, ever know how this is going to affect anybody. You know, when I got here, I wasn't thinking about getting sober. I wasn't thinking about stopping drugs. I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. You know what? They gave me a big book. They gave me a meeting directory. They said, this is where you go. This is what you do. They said, you get a sponsor. You ask a lot of questions. That's what I did. Anytime I didn't understand something, I pulled Tom aside, I pulled somebody else aside, and I asked them, what's the deal with this? How does this work? What does this mean? You know, the God thing was kind of weird for me because I was one of those, you know, better spirituality through LSD and mescaline and any other psychedelic, actually. You know, I was reading Ram Dass and Timothy Leary in 67, 68, thinking I'm going to find the path to enlightenment through window pane or something, you know? And so when I got here, you know, the whole God thing, I didn't have that much of a problem with it, but I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to get on my knees. I didn't want to do work. I didn't want to have to think that this is going to be some freaky-deaky religious thing where somebody's going to push Jesus down my throat, you know? I mean, I just wanted to know, what do I have to do to, like, exist one day at a time? And you know, over a process of a few years and a few hundred people helping me, I was able to find out that, you know, I'm able to develop a personal relationship with a power greater than myself. Because that's all the book asks of you. You know, All the book asks of me is to develop a personal relationship with a power greater than myself. That will solve all my problems. That will solve all my problems. And to this day, everything that I've gotten has been solved. Every issue that I've gotten has been solved. Now, they may not be resolved. I still have a piece of brain tumor. I still have a tumor on my kidney. I still have Hep C. 20 questions. Well, you know, there's something I think we should make question 21. Do you have Hep C? So I don't know how I got sidetracked by that, but you know, my problems aren't necessarily resolved, but I learned to become okay with my problems. I learned how to go out in the world and be comfortable with my problems and find a solution for my problems, you know? And, you know, I'm no saint. I wake up, I have bad days. I'm not the most chipper person in the morning. I need a good half hour to an hour just to fucking get my head screwed on right before I want to have a conversation with another human being. That's just my nature. You know, and what I do is I get up and I do the same thing I did when I slept on John's couch and when I got my first apartment. I fight with the remote control, I fight with the LA Times, I fight with the 12 and 12, I fight with the big book. Who's going to get my attention for the next 15 minutes? Sometimes the girl on Channel 11 wins, sometimes the big book wins, you know? And, you know, and the other thing is one of the great saving graces of my sobriety, especially in the last 8 years, has been the 12 and 12. You know, I've read the big book a bunch of times. I have 3 copies that are underlined in a lot of different ink. But about 8 years ago, I picked up the 12 and 12 and I really started to study it line by line by line. And I saw all sorts of things that I'd never seen before. You know, I think 2 of the most, 25 after? I've always thought 2 of the most confusing steps to most new people in AA, and I mean up to 5 years, are 6 and 7. Because you go to 6 and 7 and there's 2 paragraphs in the big book and you go, okay, and your sponsor has you say a prayer and you go, okay, what's a character defect again? What's a shortcoming again? And you don't quite get it, you know? And then if you go to the 12 and 12, which was written 9 years later, there's like 43 paragraphs on just those 2. You know, and I think in 1969, before Bill died, if he'd have spent some time rewriting essays on 6 and 7, we might have a whole nother 164 pages just on 6 and 7. Because my character defects kick my ass on a daily basis. It does not matter how much of a recovered alcoholic I am, because I'm recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, not alcoholism. I'm recovered from a lifestyle that I used to live that was dangerous to myself and others. You know, my head on certain days before I open my eyes will tell me, what's the point? You're a piece of shit. Your life is over. You're useless. Why bother? Pack everything up and move to Thailand. Don't even get up, you know? And there are mornings before I open my eyes where I am saying prayers and just in it going da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, clear my head of these thoughts. You know, and I was sharing this with an old-timer, one of those old men the other day, and telling him that I'd had one of those mornings, and he goes, with his old-timerness, he goes, man, isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful that you had that kind of a morning? And I'm like, what are you, being a smart ass? You know? And he goes, no, just think about it. When you were new, did you ever pray before your eyes were open? And I went, absolutely not. He goes, so you've had enough spiritual growth happen in your life that you automatically know where to go for the answer, whether or not you think it's going to work. You're going to take the action that's going to provide you with the result. That's Alcoholics Anonymous working in your life. And I was like, wow. How do these guys keep this stuff so simple and so right there in front of them all the time, you know? And you know, thank God for the people that are in front of me. Thank God for guys like Rick who took a 25-year cake. I need to see guys take 25 when I'm 23. I need to see guys take 28 when I'm 23. I want to know that it's possible to get to the next level no matter what life throws on the playing field, you know? Because what I've been taught in AA is to be in the middle. You know, there's a lot of guys that sit around here and they go like up in the reserve section at Dodger Stadium, and then they sit around and they go, look at those fools down there going to all those meetings, acting like idiots, reading that book, going to step studies, you know. Then you got the guys in the box seats who actually think they know something about the game, but they're not in the game. They just like to talk a good game, but they can talk a really good game because they've gone to meetings so long that they can just lay out the shit, you know. But then you got the guys that are actually in the middle. You know, people like Coco, who still has a commitment here, and Carol, who still has a commitment here, and Laura, who still has a commitment here 20-something years later. I'm a secretary. I'm a birthday person. I am a treasurer person. I am, you know, I lose track of what I am, but I am. You know, I still go to panels. I was at Weingart Center again another week ago. I'm going to be at VA next week. You know, I'm in the middle doing what I was taught to be, what you have to be doing in the middle, and that's getting dirty in AA. Showing up, being in the middle of the game. You know, it's all fun and great to go to coffee, and it's all fun and great to go to the movies, and it's all fun and great to dress up and look good and chase the other sex. But the reality of it is alcoholism will kill you. Untreated alcoholism will kill you. You know, and here's an opinion that you guys are going to get. I don't see anybody, and I've been into a few cancer wards, and there's some people that are here that have been into a few cancer wards. I don't see anybody walking around a cancer ward talking out loud, making a lot of noise, spilling coffee on the floor. But I'm in a meeting to help me with remission from a disease that wants me dead every day, and people can't respect the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous when somebody's up here reading chapter 5, which might be the first time a newcomer's hearing it who might have hope because he heard chapter 5. Respect the podium. If you want to kill yourself, take it outside in the parking lot. But it's only my opinion, you know? But my experience shows me that people that are in the middle stay around here a long, long time, you know? And as I said, when I got sober, nobody gave me a secret big book and said, forget the blue one, take the green one, this is where the real steps are. You know, nobody gave me a secret meeting directory and said, go to these meetings because this is where the winners are. I mean, I got the same basic toolbox that any other newcomer who's in denial got, you know? And I took that toolbox and I did what I was told, and when I wasn't sure how to use a tool, I asked somebody. You know, today I got that same toolbox. The tools might be a little fancier, a little shinier, and maybe a better grip on them, but the tools are still the same that I have every single day. There's nothing difficult that I do on a daily basis that's hard. Oh, it's too hard to go to that meeting tonight. I have too much to do, you know? I mean, I don't know. I get back and forth with my opinions, which sucks, but anyway, 9:24. I think you've had enough. But I can only wish for you guys the kind of blessings and the kind of grace that I've been given in my recovery. You know, I've had fantastic sponsors. I've had 4 or 5 different sponsors through 4 or 5 different events in my life that have carried me through individual situations, never understanding why this person was put in my life and then always knowing why they were in the end, you know? Never understanding why friends and people were put in my life and opportunities were put in my life, and then later always seeing why. Because God's just an uncomplicated way of spelling coincidence, and there's synchronicity everywhere on a daily basis. You know, we're blessed and we're carried on the wings of angels when we stay in the middle of AA. And it's not any different for any one of us. It's the exact same for every one of us. You know, every one of us is but a ripple in the pond from where Bill and Bob got together in Akron, and our only job is to carry this message on a daily basis and try to help another alcoholic that's suffering. Thanks.